planning my Pony Express trip, I broke the trail into 5 sections between St. Joseph and Salt Lake City. I based each section on the terrain and how far I thought I could ride in a week. At the end of each week, I'd give myself a layover day to wash, reprovision, and rest. The first section was the Prairie, about 350 miles from St. Joseph, Missouri to Kearney, Nebraska. I don't have a lot of pictures from the first couple of days. Let me just tell you how things started off while giving you a quick tour of some of the Pony Express sites in St. Joseph. When I rolled my bike out of the garage to start my ride, my front tire was flat. Once I left St. Joe, the next bike shop on the trail was in Kearney, so I probably should have stayed and gotten it fixed in town. Instead, I prayed the leak was a slow one. Then I pumped up the tire and rolled down the hill to the Pony Express stables, mile 0 of the Pony Express bikepacking route. Around 10 miles later, I passed through Wathena, Kansas. The tire was still holding air, but I ran into a new obstacle. 3 actually. Mud, hills, and steep, muddy hills. I always pictured Kansas as flat. Man, was I wrong. I was crossing the glacial hills of northeast Kansas. Just look at this ride profile. So many ups and downs it looks like a saw blade. I rode 50 miles of hills that day. In fact, I started climbing west of Wathena and didn't get a break until I hit the Platte River 8 days later. As for the mud, so long as I stayed in the tire tracks of cars that had passed before me, I rode easily enough all morning on the gravel roads through towns like Troy. Wait, did I say mud? The glacial hills are made from loess, a wind-blown silt that when wet acts like glue-impregnated clay. I'd met a couple of cyclists in St. Joe, Emma and Derek, who'd warned me about the mud. It was like peanut butter, they told me. It'll rip your derailleur off. They weren't exaggerating. I found that out after lunch. I had topped a hill and saw a sign that read, "Gravel Ends." Just as I was processing that information, I came to a dead stop, rim deep in mud. I nearly went over the handlebars. I had to detach my trailer and carry my bike, trailer, and gear back to the top of the hill in 3 trips. Later that afternoon, I stopped by Kennecott. This was the first home station for the Pony Express. There were 2 types of stations, home stations like Kennecott and swing or relay stations like the one back at Troy. Riders changed horses at swing stations, which averaged around 15 miles apart. Home stations were where they ended their run, handing off the mochila of mail to the next rider to carry forward. After Kennecott, it was a short ride to Horton, Kansas, and my stop for the night at the campground at Mission Lake. A peaceful end to a troublous first day. When I woke the next morning, my front tire was flat, but it had made the entire ride the day before. I just have to reinflate it every morning. For immigrants, this first section of the trail across the Kansas-Nebraska prairie was a shakedown part of their overland journey. It was for me as well. My bike and gear held up fine, except for the tire, of course. Well, and my butt. I had broken my collarbone and couldn't train for 2 months leading up to the ride. When you're off the bike, the butt goes first. It's also the largest muscle group to reacclimate to long days in the saddle, which can make those days feel even longer. Even so, I spent a nice afternoon in Seneca, listening to music on the main drag and checking out the Pony Express monuments. I spent another restful evening camping nearby. The next morning, I rode on to Marysville. Along the way, I passed a few station monuments, including Ash Point and Guittards Station. The land started to spread out more. I was approaching the western edge of the glacial hills. Marysville sits on the Big Blue River. I rode into town from the north along a lovely river trail. Right in the middle of town is the Pony Express Plaza, a small park dominated by a massive bronze sculpture said to be the largest of its kind in the Midwest. It was the iconic Pony Express image, rider leading forward in the saddle, face in the wind, spurring a galloping pony with its mane flying and its tail pointed straight back like a starched flag. It's the same image you see all along the Pony Express Trail. The image is powerful, but misleading. During the day, they rode about 10 to 12 miles per hour, about the same pace I kept on my bike, which I can tell you after riding 1,400 miles is not very fast. At night, they rode less than half that speed, trusting the horse to keep to the trail. But the galloping pony is good PR. I mean, who'd be inspired by a statue of a slouching cowboy just trotting along? I set up camp in Marysville City Park. Then I went to the Pony Express Museum in town. It was closing, but the volunteer took the time to sit outside and give me a virtual tour. He was proud of his town and its Pony Express heritage. Also, I think he was hoping to avoid some chores waiting for him back home. After leaving Marysville the next morning, I crossed a small divide between the Big Blue River and the Little Blue River. I reached the latter near Hollenberg Pony Express Station, a rare example of a station that still stands more or less unaltered in its original location. I crossed from Kansas into Nebraska and saw my first trail ruts. At least that's what a sign told me. The ruts looked like tire tracks cut across the corner of a lot that could have been made by a tractor the week before. The problem wasn't with the ruts, but with my state of mind. The heat and the dry crosswind were taking their toll. I had left the glacial hills of Kansas, but now I had entered windy, dry cropland. As the day wore on, my lack of training the final 2 months finally caught up to the rest of my body. I felt that not only might I not be able to finish this trip, but that I might not even want to finish. By the time I crawled into Rock Creek Station, my campground for the night, I was baked, or as cyclists say, bonked. Fortunately, I picked a campsite next to the camp hosts, Marilyn and Dale. They invited me over for dinner, and I ate so much that I was embarrassed. I felt like the planet-sucking doomsday machine from Star Trek, swallowing down anything Marilyn put on my plate. It was wonderful. The next morning, they sent me off with fresh coffee and a prayer. I'd survived my dark night of the soul thanks to their kindness. I wouldn't have another day as rough until a month later when I crossed South Pass. I followed the Little Blue River for 3 days, from Hollenberg Station to Prairie Lake. The river made good traveling in emigrant times. The road was relatively flat and hard, and there was always fresh water and forage along the way. These were halcyon days for the overland immigrants of the mid-1800s, especially compared to the trials that faced further west. Early travelers all likened the prairie to the sea. Their wagons were prairie schooners, the hillocks ocean swells. West of Hebron, the land opened up and I got my first sense of what they meant. This was easy land to disappear in before it was carved into parcels. In the 1580s, Coronado's men had to make landmarks out of buffalo dung to find their way back to camp. The downside was that farms and towns were fewer and further between. The wind had a bone in her teeth throughout this section. It seemed to blow hard and from every direction but from behind. Every day, I seemed to run low on water. One day, the only town I passed through was Oak, Nebraska. This stretch along the Little Blue is mostly known for raids made by Cheyenne, Arapaho, and Lakota warriors in summer 1864. The raids ranged for hundreds of miles across the trail. The Native Americans' long-standing grievances and the more immediate causes of the raids are well documented. But with the exception of a brief mention on the OCTA sign at Eubanks Ranch, not in evidence here. The monuments and interpretive signs only mention the fates of the Euro-American settlers who were kidnapped or killed. That seemed to be the case in most places along the trail. A week into my ride, I left the Little Blue to cross another divide. There is a grave near the summit known as the Lone Grave. The person buried there is Susan Hale. There is a monument over the spot where the original marker had lain. The inscription notes that Susan Hale died in 1852 and attributes her death to drinking from a well, quote, poisoned by Indians. According to noted OCTA historian and preservationist Randy Brown, cholera, not a poisoned well, caused Susan Hale's death. The Pawnees who traveled in the area were neither warlike nor hostile. They didn't have a poison that would be effective in a well, and in any case, would have drank the same water themselves. Susan Hale's grave lay in the midst of the Cholera Corridor, the trail between the Missouri River and central Nebraska. Probably 100 or so other emigrant graves lie nearby, but hers is the only one that's been located. Not far past the gravesite, I passed by Sand Hill Pony Express Station. I soon found myself struggling over, you guessed it, a sandy road. I'd read about immigrants struggling to get their wagons out of deep sand, but never imagined that 170 years later I'd be doing the same. At last I hit the coast of Nebraska, the Platte River. It was a mile wide in immigrant days, and the sandy banks reminded overlanders of a seashore. I turned to follow the Platte River west. I fought a mean crosswind as I rode to the site of Fort Kearney, one of the few places overlanders could reprovision until the mid-1850s. I toured the fort, but skipped camping there in favor of a motel in town. I'd been on the trail for 8 days. I needed to lay over and get everything ready for the next leg of my trip.